Hey, this video may sound like it's going to be maybe a bit depressing or discouraging, but what I want to tell you is that it can be incredibly insightful and perhaps even profound for shifting how you think about happiness. Because we're going to talk about the top regrets of the dying, and particularly what that shows about how we should be living our lives right now. So some of the background on this channel, oftentimes I try to give very practical science-based tools that you can begin to implement to be happier in work and life. And I thought this resource I'm going to talk about was really interesting because it is not clinical research. It's not published in any scientific journals, but I found that her approach was incredibly scientific in a sense, because what the story I'm going to tell you about is about a nurse named Bronnie Ware, who worked in palliative care, which is caring for the dying. And she started to do almost like informal research, kind of like qualitative research and interviews with people who were dying about what they regretted. Like, what would you have wanted to do differently? And like I said, this is going to inform how we can live our lives. So in a sense, I almost think of this as like a observational study, right? Where you're working with these people and you're trying to figure out like, okay, what are the common threads we pull across all these different people about what matters most in life? So that's the backstory is this nurse, Bronnie Ware. She spent years and years doing this, caring for people in the last years of their life. And so she started to catalog common themes that came up for people as they were dying. So let's get into each of these and we'll talk about a little bit each one. The number 5 is, I wish that I had let myself be happier. So what we see here is that a lot of these people felt like they made their happiness maybe contingent on something when they were younger. Like, oh, I have to get that promotion, or I have to make a certain living, or I just have to get on to that next thing. And they didn't realize that there is some element of choice. And I like to be careful in saying happiness is a choice because it's not that simple. Of course, there's complexities, genetics even play a role, life circumstances, fairly complex. But on some sense, it is also a decision to say, can I accept what I have now? A lot of these kind of cognitive reframes. And so often there was just a fear or not being as authentic as they could have been, and just kind of this pressure that people didn't manage to let go of until later in life. So that was number 5. Number 4, I wish I'd stayed in touch with my friends. Now this one I could see some fairly big differences between generations. My generation, we're very fortunate to have technology that facilitates this sort of connection. And of course, I'm not talking about social media, which generally has been shown to be fairly detrimental to mental health, especially youth mental health. But more broadly, all of the platforms that enable us to stay connected, messaging, email, group chats, etc. But that was a common one, is you have people that develop these strong relationships as they're growing up, then even into college, and then everyone sort of goes out on their own, and you just lose track. And there was sort of often even maybe a lack of like, it wasn't intentional. It's just like life happens and you go and you realize, oh, I haven't talked to Jeff in like 5 years. And so a potential lesson here is using technology to your advantage, but also being intentional in investing in these relationships. Something I do that's super weird, but as you know, if you watch my videos by now, I'm super weird, is I actually had one of my virtual assistants go into my calendar and set reminders for a bunch of people. Like I sent him a spreadsheet that was like Mitchell 1 month, Jeff 3 months, Luke 2 weeks, etc. And what he did was created a reminder for each of those persons so that pops up in my calendar like every month, say hi to Lewis, or every 2 weeks, say hi to Luke. And I don't even follow it every single time. Sometimes I see it, I'm like, I can't do that today. But it certainly helps me, and you'd be surprised how delighted your old friends will be, even if you haven't talked to them in a while, to just get a surprise phone call from you. So that was one to avoid, is making sure that you stay in touch with your friends. Number 3, I wish I had the courage to express my feelings. So again, we see a common theme here, whether it would be like romance, whether it would be like a job, whether it would even just be like friendship, is I feel like oftentimes there's some hesitation to express how you feel about people. And this is probably even more true for men watching this video. And this is not to say you need to be over the top, lovey-dovey, just crazy shit all the time, but it's kind of something that makes sense. I mean, you can imagine that if you were nearing the end of your life or someone said, hey, you only have 2 weeks to live, the first thing you'd probably want to do is, Like, call your parents and tell them you love them. Call your partner or spouse and tell them. Call your kids. Call your best friends. Just showing and expressing how much people mean to you. And what you'll find often is that when you express this, there's a reciprocity or a mirroring where people send that back to you and can be really powerful. So the lesson there being, do not hesitate to express your feelings. Don't say, oh, if I tell this person how I feel, I'll regret it. The odds are much higher that you will regret not telling them. Number 2, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. Now I'm going to read a quote from Bronnie here. She says, "This came from every male patient that I nursed. They missed their children's youth and their parents' companionship." She goes on to point out that women also talked about this regret a little bit, but it was extremely common for men to feel like they were on a career or work treadmill their entire lives. Just never quite stepping off. And I certainly can feel this in my own life sometimes, or it just feels like kind of this constant pressure where it's like, I gotta get one more thing done. And so it's interesting to think about that, again, kind of intuitive, is that when you're nearing your deathbed or your life flashes before your eyes, you don't think, oh man, I wish I could have gotten a few more emails done. No, what do you think about? Magic moments of like going on trips or adventures or even just being home and having fun with family or friends, etc. So the idea here is to be intentional in your prioritizing. Generally on the margin, if you're thinking, I'm speaking to myself a little bit, if I can get one more thing done, or maybe I can spend 20 more minutes going on a walk or doing something fun or being with family or friends, it's likely that in the moment you might feel a certain pressure to do the work one, but trying to be wise here and learn from these lessons, it would behoove you, never used that one on a video before, it would serve you to invest in the activity that's going to bring you more joy, love, happiness, etc. Number 1, I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself and not the lives others expected of me. This was the most common regret of all. People look back on their lives and you start to realize just how influenced they were by people other than them. And that's not to say you can't have mentors or people that matter to you that you don't want to weigh their opinions. But I often see that people just feel like you have to do a certain thing, or my parents want me to do this, or everyone expects me to do something, and I'm not sure I want to do it. Then don't do it. Don't. It's the most common regret of all for people who are dying is saying they didn't stay true to themselves. They didn't live in a way that embodied authenticity. Now that's the hardest one for me to try to take into a lesson and tell you, hey, do X, Y, and Z, or do some sort of habit, because it's like, how do you stay true to yourself? I think I kind of know how to do it, but I don't really know how to explain it. So I think the simplest way to convey it is to just be mindful of it and realize just how important it is that you create spaciousness and time for reflection, and you weigh your own desires over the pressures and expectations of others. So there you have it in this video. One more time, the number 1 regret, I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself and not what others expected. 2, I wish I hadn't worked so hard, particularly for men, but with changing culture, probably increasing for women as well. I wish I had the courage to express my feelings. I wish I'd stayed in touch with old friends, and I wish that I had let myself be happier. So I encourage you to reflect on these 5 points. Some of them I prescribed habits or activities or things to consider. Others were a bit more general, but I hope that in either case you will start to think about these. And then as a final reflection, as we wrap up this video, is think, so what? So what? What does this mean for my life right now? What do I need to sustain? And what do I need to improve? So hope you enjoyed this video. Here's a video that YouTube thinks you'll like. As always on this channel, I do my best to share practical tools from both the art and the science of happiness to help you be at your best in work and life. So hope you enjoyed. This has been Jackson Kirchis, and I'll see you next time.